Okay, so for this next bit, I wanted to show you some of the problems with budgeting that is coming home to roost. So to begin with, right now, Texas has quite an unemployment problem. And whenever people are unemployed, they aren't buying anything. Whenever they aren't buying anything, there's a drop in sales tax. And as you know, we don't have an income tax. And so the sales tax is causing a drop in revenue for local governments. Um, okay, in the meantime, Wall Street is doing very well. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley are ones that particularly stand out as having incredibly high profit margins right now. And so you kind of wonder, well, what exactly is going on that they're doing great and everybody else is doing not so good? So let me show you is that the Fed is propping up the markets, and what they're doing, if you read this article, but there's a paywall, is that they're buying up roughly 4 trillion in corporate bonds, which is their debt. And the bonds have a variety of values associated with them. So there's a certain amount that is what it says it's worth, but as to whether or not it's actually worth that much is another issue altogether. And so because the Fed is buying up all this corporate debt, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs are doing just great because they hold a lot of that investment debt, and so they can accumulate more debt. And then at the same time, the money has run out. The Senate has not gotten in another bill for supporting everybody who has lost their job. And so now we're seeing the evictions come in. And so you have unemployment and evictions, which also leads to food insecurity. And of course, you know, everybody always had trouble paying their healthcare bills in the first place. And then we have a pandemic. So you've got a number of stressors that are going to cause a lot of people to fall out of the middle class. And in the meantime, corporate debt is being purchased by the government. You know, uh, they're not, helping people get jobs here. And so what you have is that the trickle down idea is that, hey, if we support the companies, then they'll hire the workers. But who's going to buy anything if nobody has any money? So that's the function that is coming into play. Um, and what you'll also see is, for example, there was a 500 billion that was set aside to be spent to help the businesses and state and local governments, and so far it's mostly benefited large companies, and it's not reached its intended recipients. So while small businesses are your largest employer, they're also the ones that are having the most difficulty right now in receiving the least amount of support relative to the deficit that the government is just running on. So, on top of all that, Texas facing now a $4.6 billion deficit. And remember, these numbers is that the government is supposed to be spending 500 billion. And so the deficit that Texas is facing is 4.6 billion, which is just a fraction of that, okay? And so far we've not gotten much help from the federal government. And in the past, for example, in 2013, Susan Coombs was the comptroller back then, and she way overestimated by 30%. It was gross how much we were going to be in debt. And so then they cut education. They cut funding to schools. And so that carries a cost in student achievement, in how competitive we can be in world markets, et cetera, et cetera. And so that carries forward by decades. So whenever you cut anything with education, what happens is that there's all these societal problems that come out of that. And then also on top of that, your ability for your workforce to compete in the wider world market is also impaired. So that is what you need to understand relative to the money, where it's going, where it's coming from, how it's being spent. All right. Good luck to all of us.